Hi friends, it's Danielle with Take Care Mama, and today I'm going to share about a bunch of books that I've read recently. I neglected to film my monthly wrap up for both August and September, so instead of just filming and being really late, I thought I would kind of combine the 2 months and just talk about the notable books that I have read. I think I have around 7, maybe 8 to talk about. These are all 4 and 5 stars for me, with the exception of the last one I'll talk about is a 3-star rating, but it's a really interesting book, so I still wanted to include it. Let's hop right into it. The first book I want to talk about is The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. Yeah, Britt Bennett. This is, oh my goodness, it was so good. I gave it a 5 stars, and this is historical fiction. The genre and writing style reminded me of The Four Winds, so if you read The Four Winds, that gives you kind of an idea. I love the concept of this book. It is about twin girls who grow up in the South. They are Black, and what's the timeline? This book goes like 4 decades. It follows a family for 3 generations. So I think these twins grow up in maybe the 70s or 60s, probably the 60s. And they end up as adults kind of separating and losing contact with each other. And one of them continues her life as a Black woman, and the other woman passes for white. So they obviously are lighter skinned Black women, and the one sister chooses to live her life as a white woman. And again, it's just a big saga about this family. There is another generation on either side of these twins that we learn about. And it was so interesting to see the different ways these 2 women's lives turned out. Identical twins. One is Black, one is white. And I just really enjoyed this story. It was kind of a slow story, which I say lovingly. I enjoy a more slow story. And this is the first I've read of her, and I definitely want to check out more. I really recommend this one. I, for the first time, read Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt. I never know how to say his name. Vonnegut? I think it must be Vonnegut. This is kind of like a modern classic, and I did not read it in high school. Let me know if you read this in high school. I feel like it's a popular pick. I went to a Christian high school, and I'm wondering if there's a reason why I didn't read this. This is an anti-war book. This book is a lot of things. It's an anti-war book for one, and the author is pretty critical about American culture and Christianity. And I love reading things that question my status quo. I love when things are turned upside down and I'm able to see them from another perspective, and I just love that. So not only is this a cultural critique and a political statement, but it's also science fiction. We are time traveling, and I am a sucker for a time traveling story. And also, it's so funny. This author is so witty. I absolutely adore this book. I had so much fun reading it. And it's short, 270 pages. So if you like me have never read this and you kind of aren't off-put by what I've described it as, I would definitely pick this up. It's short. You'll know whether or not you're going to like it in the first couple chapters, and you'll get through it in no time. I loved it. I'm going to talk about the next 2 books kind of in tandem, and it's a good segue because as I read Slaughterhouse-Five, Kurt Vonnegut's wit really reminded me of Fredrik Backman, who is a new author to me. I think I read my first, this at the beginning of this year, so very new to me. And he's quickly becoming one of my favorite authors, and he has a very similar sarcasm as what I read in Slaughterhouse-Five. I read my 3rd and 4th Backman in the last 2 months, and they are very long titles. I don't love that about him. I don't know if I'm a fan of these titles. And every morning, the way home gets longer and longer. This is a novella. It took me an hour to listen to. Both of these, I really recommend the audio adaptations. So we've got this novella, and then this one. My grandmother asked me to tell you she's sorry. And both of these books have very similar themes. We are discussing grandparents as they age and they die. In both of these, there's a dynamic of a grandparent, their child, and the grandchild, and kind of how the three of them interact. And in both, the grandparent and the grandchild have more in common together than the parent in the middle. And both of these are just heart-wrenching stories about the end of a life of a loved grandparent. This one, we follow three men. So we follow a grandpa, his son, and the grandchild. And in the longer novel, we are following females, a grandmother, her daughter, and her granddaughter. And these were both lovely. I would maybe recommend this one over the novel, mostly because of how short it is and accessible. I had my husband read this and he loved it as well. And it's just such a fun, magical, heart-wrenching story about a grandfather's battle with dementia and about how we say goodbye to someone before they physically leave us. If you have read Backman and didn't love his wit and sarcasm, which I've already talked about, I love it, but it can be a little much for people. This didn't really go there. So if you have read him before and gave it a 3, maybe a 3.5, and enjoyed it, but didn't really love it the way so many of us have, I would still really recommend picking this little novella up. Yeah, I think this would be a fun Thanksgiving read. I think this would go well with Thanksgiving vibes. I really, really, really love this. 5 stars, obviously. In case I didn't mention it, all have been 5 stars so far. I don't think I said Slaughterhouse-Five was, 5 stars for Slaughterhouse-Five. Okay, this one is a novel. It's much larger and much more Backman-esque, if I dare say so. I don't know if I can be such an authority. And this was a mashup to me between Anxious People, which is another Backman book, and I would love to know if any of you have read the following. It's another long title. Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by Jonathan Sabin Foer. Oh, so good. We again are following a female family lineage with a grandmother who is just a hoot and is such a good grandmother to her granddaughter, and they have a secret language together. They have a whole fantasy life together where in their dreams they go to a land called Miamis. They have a whole kingdom, fairy tale, other world that they've created with different kingdoms and different rules, and they just vibe together. They are on the same level, and the one in the middle, the mom of the granddaughter and the daughter of the grandmother, is more of a type A personality. So that kind of dynamic is discussed. We have the fairy tale fantasy situation being discussed, which is just fun. There are some heavy topics in here. I was very close to stopping my reading of this and starting over with my 8, soon to be 9-year-old. I'm kind of glad I didn't. It might be too old for him, but this for an older child than 8, 9 might be a really fun read along because it does have that playful fantasy adventurous side to it. And why I say extremely loud and incredibly close, why I made that comparison, is there's a fun scavenger hunt. And then Anxious People, which is by the same author as this, it has to do with an apartment flat, and we get to know each of the different tenants and learn about their quirks and their stories and how they relate to one another. It's just so good. So good. I loved it. 5 stars. Next is The Dutch House by Anne Patchett. A little segue from the last one that I talked about. Both of these books discuss, or not necessarily discuss, but both of these books contain a character who is a very good person and does a lot for others. A very selfless person, you might say. And at the same time, these two women are terrible mothers. And I haven't read a lot of literature with that kind of character, and I really enjoyed that aspect of both of these. But The Dutch House is historical fiction in, what town are we in? Pennsylvania, right? I think we're in Pennsylvania in the 70s and 80s, I hope. I hope I'm right about that. And this is just a lovely family saga. And the Dutch house is the house that the kids grew up in. And it's this lovely mansion in a lovely neighborhood. And the Dutch house turns out to be kind of a major character in this book. And I really like that when there is a place that becomes almost a character. I just find that really fun. Yeah, it's just a really lovely story about a super dysfunctional family and this house that they grew up in. And I both don't want to say more, and also there isn't really a lot more to say. I've talked to other people who loved this book and found it a little boring, and I can understand that. Like, it's not, the story is not the plot. It is a nice plot and it is a great story, but it's more like you are along for a slow ride, and at the end you will say, what a lovely story that was. And that is exactly how I felt. I love this cover too. I feel like this might be a little controversial as far as covers go. And by that I mean, I'm just sure that some people think it's ugly, but I really love this cover. Okay, The Dutch House. Oh, so we're getting down to it. Okay, I read Stephen King's Misery. I just finished this a couple weeks ago. And hello, this is my favorite Stephen King I have read thus far. I think it's my 12th, I don't know, somewhere around there. And I think this might make my top end of the year list. I think this might be top 5. And that's saying a lot, I think, because I'm going to read about 100 books. I adore this book. So if you don't know, this is a horror book and very thrilling. Horror/thriller, I would call it. I was on the edge of my seat more than I ever have been for a book. I felt like I was watching an intense movie the entire time. We are witness to a famous author's car accident in a snowstorm in Colorado, and he awakens in a stranger's house, and she is tending to him and all of his injuries. And it turns out that this person who saved him from the accident is a huge fan of his novels. And very quickly, the author realizes that this is kind of a kidnapping situation, and she becomes angry about how one of his books ends up, and she does horrible things to him, and she is very scary. Oh my goodness. This is such an interesting book. There are really only 2 characters the entire time. I mean, that's not 100% true, but for the most part it is. And It was so good. I know it's a famous movie. We did rent it, and it just felt different to me than this book, and I decided not to finish it because I just want to remember how this was. People love the movie. I think maybe those who watch the movie first probably feel the same way about the book. I think it just depends what you pick up first. I love this, you guys. I think if you like scary books, you should definitely pick this up. And there are just so many things to ponder. Like there's just a lot of metaphors in here. Stephen King, I think, didn't realize it till much later that this book for him was a metaphor for cocaine and his addiction. And knowing that and thinking about it, it's just like really cool. I love this. I say the same things. I gotta get some new words. I liked this very much. And then lastly, this is my 3-star, Ishmael by David Quinn. I read this years and years ago, like more than 10 years ago, and it had a profound impact on me, and it's something that I think about every so often. So I wanted to read it again, and I did. And I was a little disappointed, but I still want to talk about it because I think it does some really interesting things. This is a book about a man who finds an ad that says, "Teacher seeks pupil, condition, pupil must want to save the world," or something like that. I don't know. So this guy is intrigued and he goes to the location to figure out what it's all about. And he finds a gorilla in a cage in a room, and he finds that he can communicate with said gorilla, and finds that the gorilla is actually the teacher. And then through the course of this book, the teacher, the gorilla, lectures us, the reader, and the main character, and our whole world is turned upside down. This book is definitely wanting to change people's opinions and giving them a new perspective on the world and humanity and how we relate to other life on the planet. And it's basically making a case that humans are messing up everything, and that something happened in history where we evolved so much and we got the idea in our heads that we are above all other creation, and then used religion, and not just Christianity, but a lot of world religions. I mean, probably all of them say that, or most of them, that not only are we above other species, but that God made the world for humans. And this book kind of turns that upside down and shows us that we kind of took that power into our own hands and subsequently have been slowly ruining the world decade by decade. And now it's getting to a turning point. Like, if we don't wake up, we will destroy the world. And I still loved the lectures, and I still learned a lot, and it still made me think. But I'm giving it a 3 stars because I don't know if it quite works well as a novel. I get why he did it. If this wasn't a novel, I don't think I would have ever picked it up 15 years ago or however long ago it was. If it was a nonfiction, I don't know if it would have made the same splash. With that being said, there is close to zero plot in here. This is basically the author lecturing us about his views, which are very interesting. And in order to make it a fictional work or a novel, he had a gorilla say the words. Like, nothing happens in this book. Basically nothing. And I don't know. It bothered me a little bit. It was a little bit of a letdown. I think he either should have made it in a nonfiction or been more interesting with the plot. It felt like I was being schooled a little bit, which I didn't mind, but that's not a novel. You know what I mean? Okay, I think that's everything. I don't think I mentioned that I gave 4 stars to The Dutch House. Man, I loved it. I loved all of these a lot. So thank you so much for watching. All of the books will be linked below, which are affiliate links, which actually help my channel. So it doesn't cost you any more to buy a book through one of my links, but I will get a small commission back from Amazon, and yeah, that would be awesome. So let me know if you have read any of these, or if you end up reading any of these. I'd love to know what your thoughts are. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day and take care. Bye.